The jungle floor is a tapestry of rot and life, thick with humidity you can almost drink. Deep within this green labyrinth, a settlement was carved out of the wilderness. They called it their sanctuary, a promised land built on ideals of equality and community. It began with hope. Hundreds followed a charismatic leader into the heart of South America, eager to escape a world they saw as corrupt and broken. They cleared the land with their bare hands, planting crops and building simple wooden homes. In the early days, photographs show smiling faces, communal meals, and children playing under the tropical sun. It was a vision of utopia made real. But the jungle has its own laws, and utopias are fragile things. The isolation was absolute. Cut off from the outside world, the community became a nation unto itself, with its leader as the sole authority. His voice, once a source of comfort and inspiration, began to change. It filled the airwaves of the settlement's rudimentary public address system, a constant presence from dawn until long after dusk. He spoke of love and unity, but also of enemies, of conspiracies, of persecution. He warned them that the world beyond their borders was waiting to destroy their paradise. Fear, like the jungle vines, began to creep into every corner of their lives. Discipline tightened. Small infractions were met with public shaming. Dissent was labeled as treason. The work became harder, the food scarcer. People grew thin, their eyes hollowed by exhaustion and a creeping unease. The leader's sermons grew more erratic, more paranoid. He would ramble for hours, his voice a hypnotic drone that blanketed the settlement in a fog of anxiety. He described elaborate loyalty tests, rehearsals for a day of crisis he claimed was inevitable. They were told these were revolutionary acts, tests of their devotion to the cause. Most complied. What choice was there? The jungle was impassable, and the world they had left behind was now painted as a hellscape. Then the visitors arrived. A delegation from the outside, concerned by troubling reports from worried relatives. They came with cameras and notepads, trying to pierce the veil of the community. At first, they were greeted with a carefully staged performance of contentment. There were songs, dances, and scripted testimonials of happiness. But beneath the surface, the tension was a physical thing. Notes were secretly passed, desperate whispers exchanged in stolen moments. "Help us," they pleaded. Some residents openly chose to leave with the delegation, a crack in the facade that could not be repaired. The leader saw this not as a choice, but as a profound betrayal. As the visitors and the small group of defectors made their way to the local airstrip, the mask of paradise finally dropped. The carefully constructed world shattered in an eruption of violence. The escape was cut off. Back in the settlement, the leader's voice echoed from the speakers, no longer hypnotic, but sharp, urgent, apocalyptic. He announced that the time had come. The enemy was at their gates, and their dream was over. There was only one way to preserve their dignity, one final revolutionary act to protest the conditions of an inhumane world. He called it a transition, a journey to another plane. He told them it was not an end, but a protest. Large vats were brought to the central pavilion. The contents were a dark concoction, a mix of flavored drink and poison. The children were first. They were told it was medicine for the journey. Parents, their faces numb with a horror beyond comprehension, administered the dose to their own sons and daughters. The sounds of crying and confusion soon faded, replaced by an awful, penetrating silence. Then, it was the adults' turn. Some went willingly, convinced this was the only honorable exit. Others hesitated, resisted. Armed guards ensured compliance. The leader's voice provided the soundtrack to the end, a rambling, self-pitying monologue over the public address system, justifying the unjustifiable as his followers, his family, lay dying around him. As the sun set, the jungle reclaimed its silence. The settlement, once teeming with life and idealistic fervor, became a city of the dead. Over 900 bodies lay scattered across the manicured lawns and wooden walkways, a tableau of abandoned hope. They lay in family groups, arms draped around each other in a final, terrible embrace. The leader was among them, the architect of this final act. The air, once filled with his voice, was now still, heavy with the sweet, sickening smell of death and decay. When the outside world finally broke through the wall of green, they found a scene that defied understanding. The sheer scale of the loss was staggering. It wasn't a battleground. It was a home. Toys lay next to bodies, half-eaten meals sat on tables, and daily chores were left forever unfinished. The investigators who walked those grounds were changed by what they saw. They documented the evidence, counted the dead, and tried to piece together the final hours. But the questions lingered, hanging in the humid air long after the bodies were gone. How could a dream of a better world curdle into such a nightmare? The settlement was eventually dismantled, consumed by the relentless advance of the jungle. The buildings have rotted away, the paths are overgrown, and the fields have returned to wilderness. Nothing remains but a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered on the wind. But the truth is more unsettling. It wasn't a monster that did this. It was a man and the people who believed in him. It was a community that, step by logical step, walked away from the world and into an abyss of its own making. The most disturbing thought is not that this happened in a remote, isolated jungle. It's the quiet realization that the path to that pavilion, to those vats of poison, did not begin in the jungle. It began with a promise of a better world, a place to belong. A promise that, in the end, demanded everything. And you have to wonder, listening to the voices of our own time, which promises we choose to believe.